So in my last video, I talked about persistence and what persistence actually means in the context of manifestation and the law of assumption. Because that is a topic that goes hand in hand with one of the most commonly asked questions that I get, and that is, how do I persist? How do I continue to go to the end when the 3D is showing up in the opposite way? How do I continue to go to that end and live in the wish fulfilled when my 3D is awful? When there's a whole bunch of terrible things around me and it's distracting me, I'm triggered, what do I do then? Well, if you are like most people, you're going to use the number one thing that you are told repeatedly in this community, and that is to ignore your 3D. Don't accept it. Just ignore it. It'll go away if you take your attention away from it. And that's really what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about ignoring the 3D, because what I'm noticing from a lot of people is a very misconstrued and misunderstood way of approaching this that is causing a lot of struggle and resistance and frustration. So today I want to talk about ignoring the 3D and how we want to go about navigating this 3D world while continuing to go to the end. So if you find yourself struggling due to the 3D circumstances, if you are feeling completely delusional trying to ignore it, then stick around because this video is especially for you. By the way, hi, I'm Missy Renee. And on this channel, we talk all things manifestation and the law of assumption. So if those are topics that you want to learn more about, then definitely be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon for notifications, and if you enjoy my videos, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you're interested in any of my resources, such as my coaching programs, workshops, or masterclasses, I got all that information down in the description box, so don't forget to check it out. So the main reason that I want to make this video is because I'm noticing a trend going on with how people are approaching this idea of ignoring the 3D. And that's essentially that a lot of people are feeling exhausted, thinking that they have to essentially fight against their own mind, while at the same time desperately affirming against a triggering 3D situation because they have it in their mind that if they react to the 3D, if they acknowledge the 3D, that it's only going to create more of the unwanted circumstance. Basically, what I'm seeing people doing is trying to suppress their emotions and their reactions out of fear that any kind of acknowledgement to the unwanted state is only going to breed more of the same. But the problem with this approach, well, there's many problems with this approach, but the main problem with this approach is that by trying to reject what your physical senses are showing you as reality right now, when you are trying to ignore the 3D and put your head in the sand and put your fingers in your ears and just say, no, it's not happening. By taking this approach, you're inadvertently giving it more attention, because what's going to happen is there's going to be that part of you, that logical, rational, ego part of you that is going to fight back and say, no, this is actually happening. You're being delusional. This is the reality. This is what's taking place right now. And that's all there is to it. So when we try to fight that, when we get into a back and forth with that little voice in the back of our mind, that inner critic or the voice of reason, we're effectively feeding that old story anyways, through giving it our focus and attention. The misunderstanding here is that when people hear the phrase, don't accept it and ignore it, most people mistake this to mean that we have to flat out reject the 3D circumstances as they are right now. But the more that you try to reject it, the more you are inadvertently just giving that old state attention. You're bringing into awareness this unwanted thing. And then when you start to fight with yourself, when you start to go back and forth with that inner critic, you're continuing to occupy the state of not having and not being what you desire. We're essentially just creating a whole hell of a lot of resistance. And as the age-old saying goes, what you resist persists. And this is how you, once again, inadvertently end up in a feedback loop and just feeding into that old story, thinking that by ignoring it, it's just going to go away. So I want to clarify what we mean when we say to not accept it, what ignoring the 3D really means. By not accepting it, that just means not to accept it as final. Do not accept that this is the final outcome and that it's not going to change. See, as humans, we have this really weird tendency to think that just because something is a certain way right now, that it's always going to be. We tend to take present circumstance and past incidents and use that to gauge what's going to happen in the future. So what we want to avoid is doing just that. We want to avoid assuming that just because something looks terrible right now, that it's always going to be terrible and it's never going to change and this is never going to work. That is what it means to not accept the outcome right now. That's what it means when we say deny the evidence of the senses. Deny that impulse that we have, that logic and reason that says that just because something is a certain way right now, that it's always going to be. When we say don't accept it, that doesn't mean you need to put yourself in denial or lie to yourself about the state you currently occupy. It just means that you don't accept it as final. So the key point to take away from this video is that it is okay to accept that things are a certain way right now, that things look and appear to be one way, even if it's not what we want, even if it's not ideal. We can accept that this is what currently is, because ultimately this is just a state. This is just a state of consciousness. If we want to occupy a new state, a more desirable state, we have to accept that we are in a state right now, and it may not look the way that we want it to. We must accept that our current 3D circumstances are the result of past reactions, past impressions, our former beliefs and assumptions. This current 3D reality is all just the outpicturing of things that we had imagined prior, not that it is always going to be this way or that this is the final outcome. Accepting the 3D as it is right now does not mean resigning to it. And that must be made crystal clear, because that is the false presumption that many people are making. A lot of people are incredibly fearful that if I accept that this is my 3D currently and this is how it is right now, that I'm just surrendering to fate and what I don't want. This is the furthest thing from the truth. And this is going to help you considerably going forward, especially if you are noticing a lot of inner battle and a lot of resistance to the 3D as it is right now. So acceptance is incredibly important here. We must accept ourselves and all the strengths and weaknesses that we have unconditionally. We must accept that creation is finished, which means that all states of consciousness, both wanted and unwanted, exist, and they all exist right now. This isn't about the denial of one state and the acceptance of another. It's the acceptance that both are real states of consciousness and that I ultimately can choose where I want to direct my attention. We can acknowledge that things look crappy where they are right now, with the understanding that this is the unintentional outpicturing of something that I once impressed, something that was not desirable, something that I may have been fearful of, based on my old beliefs and assumptions. But I do not have to continue to choose and select the state over and over. I can fully acknowledge and embrace and accept that this is where I am in this present moment. However, I also, as the operant power, as the creative power, with the hand of my imagination, can select a new state entirely. And I can live fully and completely in imagination as the person that I desire to be. And if you're like most people, you're probably going to notice relief at just the acknowledgement of that, of the acceptance of what is, that this is just a state like anything else. And you are the I am who occupies states, and that we're always traveling and moving through states of consciousness, and that nothing is ever fixed or final. That's what it means to deny the evidence and to not accept it. This is not about pretending or lying to yourself, because something that you are going to quickly find out is that you cannot lie to yourself. God cannot be mocked. We know if we are trying to deceive ourselves. We know if we are being dishonest with ourselves. We can feel that. And that is where a lot of the resistance comes in. Because maybe in this present moment, maybe in this state you occupy right now, the thing that you desire does not feel real. It does not feel honest. It does not feel factual. And that is okay. We have to be okay and accept that that's where things may lie right now. But that ultimately, through my own wonderful human imagination, I can transcend any of these states, because I know and I already can accept that in imagination, everything already is, that I can occupy any state in imagination. That though the 3D may look opposite of what I desire, I can ultimately go within and experience that desire right now. The biggest thing that I want all of you to hear and take away from this video is that it is okay to accept where we are in this moment. It is okay to acknowledge that this sucks, that everything about this circumstance sucks and I hate it. And it's okay because ultimately I know that I can imagine and experience something different. So accept that things are where they are and you are where you are right now. If you need to react, if you need to feel your feelings, if you need to cry, if you need to be pissed, that's okay. It is okay. All of that serves as feedback for us. That is all telling us where we may be dwelling psychologically. That may be telling us where we still have attachments and what we may need to still recondition on the inside. The issue becomes when we are constantly feeding these fears and thinking and accepting that it is always going to be this way, that I'm never going to get my person, I'm going to die alone with 50 cats, and I'm never going to get what I want, I'm always going to be broke. That we want to try to avoid. We want to reel that in. But we can absolutely acknowledge that things are the way they are right now, because this is just a state. This is one of infinite states of experience, and that is okay. Because ultimately, you're not going to continue to dwell there. And here is a quote from Neville to really help tie this all together so you have a better understanding of what I am saying here. The imaginative man does not deny the reality of the sensuous outer world of becoming, but he knows that it is the inner world of continuous imagination that is the force by which the sensuous outer world of becoming is brought to pass. He sees the outer world and all of its happenings as projections of the inner activity, and see the relationship between the inner causal world of imagination and the sensuous outer world of effects. The imaginative man does not deny the outer world of becoming, the sensuous outer world of becoming, but instead knows that it is the inner world of continuous imagination by which the outer world is brought to pass. Basically, in the simplest of terms, Neville Goddard is saying here, it's not the effects or the outside that we need to deny. Instead, it's understanding that it's the inner world, it is the inner imaginal activity, which is the cause that will determine the outer world of being. As within, so without, as they say. So we do not need to resign ourselves to some unwanted fate just because things look and seem a certain way right now. That said, we can absolutely acknowledge what is and what state we are occupying right now. Take it all as feedback. Take all the things in your outer world. Take your reactions, your thoughts, and all of the ways that you are reacting to the outer world, and use it to discern where your beliefs and assumptions lie. Use it to really understand the cause and effect that is the inner and outer world. Use it to build your faith, because the more that we could begin to see just how these events and circumstances came to be, and that is through our own imagining of them, the more that we get to see the feedback, the more our faith will grow, and the more that we will be able to transcend this unwanted state, the more that we will be able to move into a new state in imagination, occupy that place until it ultimately and finally comes to pass in our physical world. And once that change has taken place within you, you will know it because you will no longer be reacting to the current 3D circumstances. Your thoughts will change. Your triggers will change. You will no longer be receptive and attached to any of the old story, any of this old unwanted circumstance, to any of the things that you don't want. And once we know this, once we understand this, we will begin to effortlessly ignore the 3D circumstances, not through suppression or hyper-focusing with desperate affirmations or denial or delusion. As you begin to allow yourself to occupy new states in imagination, and the more that you are taking your attention and turning it inward, you will begin to actually notice and experience that change of self. And once those beliefs and assumptions are reconditioned, once you have occupied that new state internally, you will no longer be fazed by what is happening and what you are perceiving outside of you. You may even see a negative or unwanted scenario, and you will no longer identify with it. You will no longer resonate with it. You will no longer dwell there. That is what it means to ignore your 3D. And that is how you ultimately manifest literally anything you want. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you clarity and understanding. If it did, if you did enjoy it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you are interested in checking out any of my other resources, I will have links down below to my coaching programs, my workshops and masterclasses, my blog, my podcast, my social links. Got a ton of resources down in the description box below, so don't forget to check it out. Also, be sure to check out the other videos on this channel. Be sure to check out my Manifestation Fundamentals playlist. Each video is a different topic, but they all pertain in how to manifest the best life possible. And so until we meet next time, you guys, as always, please take care, be well, and never forget to not accept the unwanted circumstance as final. Never forget who you truly are and how powerful you truly are. Happy manifesting, guys.